Alrighty, I am live. Um, Tonight's subject I want to talk about um, is tonight's subject is let me see. I'm doing it. Let me respond to this text right quick, and I'm gonna get started with the live. Um, okay, okay. I want to respond to that right quick. I wanted to talk about choosing gear. I was watching a video. Hey EA, how's it going? Um, I want to talk about choosing gear, and I saw a video. It was by it's a older gentleman that has a video called Fairy Tales of Pro Audio, and he was talking about the SSL Oracle, which is another mixing console that SSLs came out with, and it's even 3 times the price of the SS Origin. So on Sweetwater, they got it for $149,000, and it's 24 channels compared to the SSL Origin which was 50 grand. It was 32 channel. Now, of course, it doesn't have dynamics and it doesn't have a whole lot of anything. I'm like, for them to really justify the price of that, I'm like, I don't know anyone if they're going to get a large console. I don't know anyone that would want to spend $150,000 today for a console. I just don't see it. I don't know why anyone would want to do that. You can come across deals like I got my Allen and Heath. That's a 48 channel. I got a steal of a deal. That normally what I got for that board doesn't normally happen. But my situation with that church, it was a board at a church. They just wanted to get rid of it because they went to a digital setup and they wanted to get rid of the analog. So I got a dirt cheap. And what the reason why I got a dirt cheap because I was willing to drive and they didn't have to crate it and freight it. Which would have been the freight cost would have been astronomical. So I said, no, I can just drive and pick it up. So that's why I got so cheap. But I don't know anyone that if they want to get an analog console or large console, there's so many consoles out there that you can buy. Even if you're going to get an SSL, if I was going to get an SSL console and I was going to get a large console, I was looking for something. I'm going, there are used SSLs as cheap as I've seen them as low as $25K, $25,000, and you're going to get, let's say I saw an SSL, I believe it was an SSL, it either 4,000 or 6,000. It was like 32 channels, or it might have been 48 channels. I think it might be even 32 channels. But even an SSL, the traditional SSL, 6,000, let's say it's 48 channels, you start for $4,000, for 40,000, right? You spend another $20,000, maybe $30,000 getting it recapped and then it getting commissioned, which means they're going to come in and they're going to redo all the wiring and they're going to recap the board. They're going to put each channel out. They're going to resolder all the capacitors and everything in the board to get it back up to specs. So you're talking maybe at best 60 to 70K. And now you got the sound that was made with, all the big board, number one hits that were mixed on a SSL. We're talking the traditional, I'm talking millions of records that were done on SSL consoles for 70K versus spending 150,000. It doesn't make sense. I would rather spend, I seen a Neve VR used on Vintage King for about 30,000. And we're talking, yeah, and it's a superior sounding, the only boards that are still quite expensive out there would be like API, like the API legacies. Those are still expensive. If I'm going to spend, those are still going about 150,000. So let me see. If I was going to spend $150,000 on a board, how's it going, Concrete Gang? If I was going to spend $150,000 on a SSL Oracle, or I'm going to spend $150,000 on an API legacy, you best believe my money's going to the API legacy. It's just for that kind of money. It is what it is. So I just don't. Once again, I've made a video about this before, about when SSL came out with their Big Six. There's like $3,000 mixer that only it was a $3,000 mixer that only gave you like 4 preamps, a very limited EQ, and things like that. I'm like, well, shoot, for $3,000, I can go get a Midas. You can go get a Midas 32 channel digital console for $3,000, or PreSonus Live. Something that's going to give you a whole ton of options for the same amount of money. Like if I went and got a PreSonus Live, at least I can do all the plugins. I'm going to get 32 channels, which means it's going to give me 32 mic pre's and all of this other stuff for the same amount of money. I'm not buying something because of its name. I'm buying something because of its options. So yes, it would. Yeah, an SSL would be nice to own if they weren't trying to extort, but they're trying to extort their name to get you to buy their product, to say, hey, look, I got an SSL. And we've proven it time and time again in today's studios, you do not need SSL products. It's just what it is. Welcome, OglePix. I'm just talking about that. So moving on. So tonight's subject is like choosing gear for your studio. What would you buy? Personally, for me, you really do not need a ton of gear anymore, like you used to. You just don't. If you have like me, who has a studio setup like mine, majority everything in this studio is completely choice. You do not have to have nowhere near what I got to get high-end sound. Now, you're going to have a lot of the older engineers that still believe in a console. They still believe in outboard gear and stuff like that. But they're also, a lot of those engineers are also still in the mindset of recording bands in a live room. And if you're doing that, yes, I would still probably build a recording studio to attract clients that may be a band that want to record, because there are still millions of bands. A lot of these are independent, unsigned, unknown artist bands, but these are independent artists that still want to go recording studios, that still have a console with outboard. They still want to go. Even some studios, they have a tape machine. There are clients like that, but a lot of people are doing a lot of stuff and are making a lot of music with VST instruments in the box and using plugins in the box. That's just, it's not saying that one genre of music is better than the other. It's just one genre of music is one genre of music, and the other genre of music is another genre of music. Hey, Maddie Two Hats. So choosing gear for your studio, it really depends on, a lot of times some people may say, what do you think is the best studio monitors? Or what preamp should I get? Or what audio interface should I get? Maybe that was probably a more valid, question to ask about 10 years ago. You probably wanted maybe to go with Burl, or, as far as your audio interface, maybe you want to go with Apogee or Lynx or Roar or something like that, or RME. But now we're talking 2025. The technology when it comes to software and gear, um, it's so there today. Um, some people you can get away with you probably wouldn't need to spend no more to maybe to have everything, probably more than a couple thousand, and that's it. You don't have to have ATC monitors or anything like that. You don't have to have $10,000 monitors anymore. You don't have to have this large 32 channel, you know, large format console anymore. You don't need to have, tons and tons of racks of compressors and EQs anymore. You just don't. A lot of times with people like me, is a lot of this is just choice. I like to mix and record this way, but not everyone, you'd be amazed how well you can get an awesome sound just using VST Instruments and the VST plugins. So you don't even have to have expensive microphones anymore. You really, Warm Audio's microphones, as an example, and I got some Warm Audio microphones, but I also have Rode microphones, MXL microphones, and so forth. Those microphones alone, trust me, if you have a really nice sounding preamp with a microphone that may be $200, $300, $400, you're going to sound competitive with the $1 million studios. A lot of times it's just knowing how to use the gear. That's really like this Marshall. This is a Marshall MXL 2000. That's the model number. It's the Mogami edition, but this microphone, the specs of it are the same. The specs of it are really close to a Telefunken 251 microphone as far as the specs and the EQ curve and everything else on it. The only thing with this microphone is I just don't have, it doesn't have the cardio pattern, the polar patterns or the 80, all that. I would have to do a little bit of EQ adjustment, but overall, you can actually get an ample quality sound vocally, or even recording a guitar or an instrument with this microphone. And this microphone is averages about $200, if that best, maybe 100, $150. That's just where we're at today. So let me see. Got a couple of comments coming in. Yep. Like I said, right now, Scarlett 18, 220. And yeah, SM57. The only thing with dynamic microphones is a lot of times you really have to push the preamp harder to hear them. But they have things like cloud lifters and things like that to really boost the volume level of a dynamic mic. And a lot of times a dynamic mic is an actually overlooked mic for vocals. A lot of people like to use dynamic mics for like drums and mic and guitar cabinets and things like that. But you can really do well with a dynamic mic. Even the SM57 is a pretty standard vocal microphone that you can record with. So welcome, Tactical MIDI. Oh, you said I do a lot of. Oh, yeah. Are you asking it? Yeah. Like I said, really, as far as getting a lot of extra outboard, it really depends on. Here's the thing. Okay, let's talk about outboard gear. Let's talk about the big studios, and when you see all of the outboard gear. I'll say this, and I'll make it really, really simple. The only really reason you'll see a studio with a lot of outboard gear is because they want to have choices. That's all it is. Prime example, I'll use some of the same common ubiquitous gear as an example. You may, let's say, an engineer might want to use a Neve 1073 preamp, right? That's a pretty common preamp in most studios. It's the 1073, which is basically It's the same preamp that came out of the early edition Neve consoles. They just put it in racks, right? So with that being said, but not every engineer wants to always use the Neve preamp colored sound on every recording. So they might say this is the reason why they, when they have the console got its own preamps in it. Let's say it's an API console, which is known for its 312 preamp, right? They might want to use that flavor of preamp instead of that Neve. That's why the Neve would be in a rack. Same thing. Let's say you have the 1176 black edition, or they might have a silver 1176, maybe a blue stripe 1176. They might have some LA2As, or they might even have some tube techs or different compressors, right? They might say, well, I was using the LA2A on bass on this drum track, but I might want to use the tube tech CLB as an example, C1LB or whatever, on bass on this, just to change the flavor of that compressor. That's the only reason why you'll see a recording studio with a ton of outboard gear. It's just flavor of choice. It's no different than you have a photographer to have different lenses. He's just getting a different photo image with those different lenses, and he might even have I have Nikons and Canons. A lot of people love Nikon for the ultra clarity, but simply like the Canon for their color science. That's all of this. Just take the same picture, but you get a little bit different image. It's just choice. But if you know that that's really that the whole thing of having a lot of plugins is the same thing. It gives you choices, right? So let's see. Let me see. I'll say what's a good all around mic. Actually, this is what I would recommend. I would never tell anyone just to own one microphone. I would always, once again, with microphones, one microphone doesn't always fit. One microphone is not always a one fits all. It's not like one shoe size. It's not like, if your shoe size is the size 11, well, not everyone's feet's the same size, right? So you have to have different size shoes. It's like going to a shoe store. You have different size shoes and different styles to fit different people's. Well, microphones are the same way. I would recommend having a few different microphones. But I do recommend, if I was going to invest in microphones, so some microphones are so cheap, like let's say you can get a Warm Audio SM40, let's say the 47 Junior, right? The Warm Audio WA47 Junior for one microphone. It's only up to $200-$300, right? Then let's say I might pick up a Rode NT1, which is only about $150-$200, right? Then I might pick up another microphone that might be $200-$300. You have 3 different flavor of condenser mics to choose from in your arsenal. That way you say, okay, if you have someone singing on one microphone, I don't really like the way they sound in that microphone. Change out the microphone to something else to give them a little, flavor to say, oh, okay, that microphone sounds better with them. Because once again, you look at the specs, it's someone who's really, their tone is really kind of mid or low end heavy. That microphone might also be kind of mid and low end heavy, where it's going to sound kind of muddyish on certain tones that they're singing. So you might get a microphone that can push the highs a little bit more in their vocals. Like, so, that's why there's like for example, the Warm Audio 251 might be a better choice. You just got to kind of use your ears. So, okay, Matt asked me, do I push my preamps to the point of distorting them? Not really. I do in other words, I do give my preamps enough input gain, and then I'll adjust the output gain. That way I'm saturating the preamp to the fullest to get the color of the preamp. That's what I do. But I don't necessarily want them to distort. I want them to be pretty clean. So that's what I do. So let's see what else you're asking. What different preamps sound much different really if they are run clean? It's kind of like, okay, because different engineers and different people, when it comes to preamps, what exactly are they listening for, right? Um, One thing I can say about preamps, especially the higher cost preamps, like the I use like the LA 610 as an example. Um, there is a warmth, a thicker warmer, even though you can push it clean, there's a more warmer, saturated a fullness about the preamp that, let's say, a really $100 preamp may not give you the capture. Um, then, or let's say that the Tone Beast as an example, which is an API, but they give you two different types of transformers, iron or nickel flavor. So it's kind of like, what am I listening for? You're kind of listening for, um, you kind of, it's almost like, how does that preamp? And you kind of, it's hard to describe, but when you run sound through these preamps, you can almost get a good idea of is how full and saturated is going to sound. Like, this is why I would say the Avalon 737, which everyone knows I got the Avalon 737s, is one of my favorite vocal mics, because it's like when I record with it, and it's a tube microphone with transformers. It just has it brings out. It's like it almost makes the vocals sound full and warm and natural in the recording. They don't sound thin. They don't sound like, in other words, I don't have to do a ton of processing to bring that vocal out, if that makes sense. With cheaper preamps, you got to work them harder, or you got to use more plugins or more gear to really make it sound a more natural, warmer, fuller sound, if that makes sense. So I think that's really what it is. So it really, really depends on the effect that, as an engineer, because sometimes some engineers they don't want the preamp to sound, that's not the, the effect they're going for. So it really depends. But so moving on. So choosing gear, and I would say if someone's really heavy into, let's say you're really heavy into electronic music, techno, EDM music. A lot of times the virtual instruments in your DAW or third-party plug-in instrument, VST instruments are probably more than enough that you need. It's really, a lot of times it really depends on how powerful your PC or Mac can handle. Because your PC or Mac, when you're using a lot of software and you're trying to use a lot of plugins, it can really start working your CPU. So you really have to be careful, especially if someone that likes to use a lot of tracks. But so I'm trying to think what else to talk about as far as choosing gear. So, and it really boils down to, what music do you do? What music do you really do? Do you do rock? Do you do country? Do you do EDM? Do you do hip hop? Do you do trap? Do you do jazz? Do you do gospel? Do you do orchestra? It really depends, because a lot of times is, how many inputs, and are you multi-tracking? Am I going to record multiple sources at the same time? Usually with a band, you want a very powerful PC or Mac, and you definitely want an audio interface with enough inputs and outputs on it. That's why I chose an Antelope Orion, because it's 32 inputs and 32 outputs on that interface for multi-tracking. But I also chose the Mark of the Unicorn, the Motus, for multi-tracking as well. Those are just really great audio interfaces. Uh, so it depends on what you want to do. Um, right now, I'm just kind of chatting. So, as more people chime in. Now, last week, I did not. I think I was just super exhausted, so I didn't stream last week. And then my camera the week before was in black and white. Turn out the camera just went out. The color portion of it just went out, so it was in black and white. So I changed out the camera. Now it's back. You can see it's back in color again. So um, sometimes I change the lighting in here to change the effect of the I don't know how it would look. I might go to my blue again. So oh yeah, see, you said technically, I'm thinking about getting the Audient ID44. And sometimes I'll see when people have they'll list gear they might be thinking about. I never get a chance to check out some of that gear, but one thing I can say, I don't think you're gonna go wrong with the and I think it's Audient. I think you put Audience, but I think you meant Audient. Um, but I think I know what you meant. So, but let me see. Yeah, I like that better. Yeah, that gets a little bit better. I changed the color of the blue, but so it really depends. Yeah, I just want to. Yeah, just tonight's subject is really about what do you all want to choose for your studio if you don't already have gear. I think someone mentioned, Uncle Pix mentioned earlier about having a Focusrite Scarlett 18i20. Uh, those are really good audio interfaces. The only thing for me when it came to the Focusrite interface, because I've had a couple of Focusrite interfaces, and it seemed like for some odd reason, and it could have been just me, but it seemed like some odd reason, Focusrite, a couple of their channels always seem to go bad for some odd reason. I don't know why, but they seem to just, I don't know what it is. So I kind of shied away from Focusrite because I was looking at some of their more expensive um, audio interfaces, and then of course eventually I came across the Envelope, and I did a thing on the Envelope years ago, and I was so blown away with the Envelope interface. I've been very happy with that interface. Of course, there's the Gen 4. I still have the Gen 3. Hadn't had any reason to upgrade, but eventually I might end up upgrading to the Gen 4. Even though by the time I upgrade, they probably have Envelope inner Gen 5. But another thing I want to talk about too is with the right now I just bought the AMEC 9099 plugin from Brainworks, which is basically the AMEC 9099 is basically a plug-in version of the infamous 9098 console. That was a Rupert Neve design console, and that plugin is still on sale. Um, so I'm anxious to try it out. I do have the plugin by is really similar by Acoustica Audio, but Acoustica Audio's plugins tend to be they're very processor heavy. So let me see. I'm actually at the premium I want is the Sawyer's Lakeside, but it's 2600 in Australia, so it's worth okay. So see, when you live in like Canada, when you live like in Canada or different countries, the import tax on that gear tend to be because of the tax of the importing of gear. So now I'm not familiar with the Sawyer Lakeside, but once again, if that is the preamp that you're looking at, I would say why not go for it? You you're probably going to be very, very happy with it. Oh yeah, ES audio recording studio says the Audient preamps sound very Neve-like. Yeah, it's kind of like with the Audient consoles. Um, I've heard Audient consoles; they do sound really, really good. So, oh, he says I don't make any money making music, so expensive gear can be harder to justify owning. None of us do. I just hate to say it, but even a lot of your big time studios aren't making a lot of money. You know, the days. This is how I'll go back to the. Let's talk about that for a second when it comes to this gear. And you ever thought about how's these big studios, affording, 3, 4, or 5 control rooms, live rooms, and they got SSLs and knees, and in the right gear they got pool techs, and they got whether it's distressors and LA2As, and they got Telefunken microphones and Newman microphones and all the big name gear. Well, how do they do it? How was these studios doing it? A lot of these studios could actually get loans because they knew they were going to draw in clients. They knew they had to get this gear because producers and record labels would want to make sure studios had that gear. When they're in other words, when you see, like, let's say Blackbird or East West or Ocean Way or Electric Lady or the Hit Factor, whatever, when they look at their, and anyone can do, when you go to their website, look at their profile, and they'll start looking at their gear, and they're saying, okay, yeah, they got an SSL. Let's say it's an SSL Duality, $250,000 Okay, they got that. Check. What kind of microphones they got? Telefunken 251s. They got Newman U67s. They got Newman 47s. They got SM84s. They got Roar 121s. They got Sennheiser. They got 421s. They got SM57s, SM58s. They got kind of preamps they got. They got 1073s, 1081s, 1084s. They have, they got Pultecs. They got LA2As. They got 1176s. They got everything. The producers, because a lot of times these producers are going to hire their own engineer, because the studios were actually renting out their spaces. So the artist is going to rent out Studio A, that control room, live room, and they're going to rent it for 3 to 6 months or whatever it's going to cost. So the studio's charging them $2,500 to $5,000 a day to rent it for whatever. But an artist got a $250,000 recording budget, so paying that was easy, right? Because they got that advance. So and they were booking artists. They were booking your Madonnas and your your Mariah Careys and your Justin Timberlakes and your Dales and your bands, your U2 and AC/DC, and those artists were going to those studios, booking those studios. So they were so booked that the budget for them to get $250,000 and then another $250,000, $1 million, the studio's paying for itself. It pretty much was paying for itself. But we all know, as record sales decline, killed the record labels, which killed advances. And now most artists, that are, even if they're signed, they already have to have a following and everything else. They're not getting the advances and all that. So this is why you're probably seeing lately, within the last 10 years, some of the biggest well-known studios, like even the Record Plant and stuff like studios like that, starting to shut down because they're just not getting Mariah Carey to go there anymore. And on top of that, because of technology, plugins, clone companies have made it so much more affordable. If it's affordable for people like you and I to get like Lindo Audio clones, well, the recording artists see this too, because It's because you think about this for a second. Um, a lot of people when they see an artist or just someone who rich, a millionaire, right, multimillionaire, you have to stay a millionaire to be able to live as a millionaire. But when your income is shrinking because you live in a $3 million mansion, and the average cost to maintain a $3 million mansion is about $300,000 in maintenance costs a year. You do the math on that. Within 3 years, you're close to the $1 million that you're spent. That's just from lights, water, pool maintenance, the cleaning crew, the people doing the yard, and the cost is astronomical to live in mansions. That's why you see more mansions are for sale than your average 2,500 square foot home. Your average 3 to 5 thousand, $400,000 or $500,000 home. More of them are occupied than mansions because most people can't afford to live in mansions. Even the people that were rich at one point, you had that one movie artist that made one great movie back in 20 years ago. If they hadn't had an agent that can get them another movie deal within 20 years, living like that millionaire, before you know it, they're broke. Trying, but anyhow, so okay, also gas is gear acquisition syndrome, yeah. Um, so yes, most are $100,000. Yeah, it's just what it is. Um, so let me see. Okay, yeah, okay. ES Audio Recording Systems, yeah. East West in LA now only has 2 rooms available. They have rented all the other rooms to out to produce. Yep. They're doing what they got to do to stay survive. And then let me see. Uh, okay, Technical said I'd rather have a great sound than even if my music's not great, but at least the sound is that's great. Um, I might have to disagree with that. I would rather have great music because if you have a great, if you're people still have to like the songs that you make. Um, they really do have to like the song because to me, I don't care if it's recorded at East West. If I don't like the song, I'm not gonna like the song. That's just where the way that's just me. Um, let's see. Welcome, Andre. Oh yeah, yes, audio. Welcome. If I didn't say welcome. Um, so the village instead of my rents the whole third floor. Yep, it's just. And then the ones that can't survive, like I thought I saw something about the record plant. Somebody mentioned something about the record plant is now condo. Oh wow, they because I know the record plant Sausalito or something like that. They sold it and then someone's trying to open it, but the music business. There are a lot of people, and I'm gonna have to say it. There are people that, especially people that's been in the music business and the recording studio business for 30, 40, 50 years and don't realize that the way recording studios were making the money, it just isn't there anymore. It really isn't. Um, because more and more people have found that it's just easier, even artists and producers have found it's just easier to buy Studio One or Logic Pro, buy a Mac and a PC, you know, convert one of their rooms in their house or whatever, and just build them a home studio and whatever the case. Most people are doing it, not everyone, um, but it's just easier. There's just people find it easier to do that. Um, but I'm not saying that people because there are people that still go to recording studios. Like for example, Barry Hill, Nashville stays busy. Because Nashville, the way people do country music, they record it. They're going to get Nashville musicians, session musicians, and they're going to go and rent recording studios, whether it's on Music Row or in Barry Hill, whatever. They're still going to do it that way, but that's the exception. Los Angeles, New York, Houston, Dallas, places like that. the clients have declined. It's just what it is. Now there are still recording studios open, but it's declined. And then there are studios like Air Studios they're mainly doing movie scores. Um, they're bringing in a lot of like Paramount and these type of companies rent Air Studios and they do these score arrangements to bring in orchestras to record in like Air Studios for the sound with real musicians playing real violins and cellos and violas and having an actual symphony. They want that for the movie score, so they're still pretty busy in like places like Air Studio because of their live room and the sound that it makes for the movie score. But for the most part, a lot of the smaller live room, control room type of studios, like the Magic Shop and all that, they closed. They just couldn't, because the rent has become astronomical for a lot of these places. Unfortunately, a lot of times these recording studios do not own the buildings. So they're the rent and the cost to keep it going is just off the charts. And they just can't maintain it because they're not getting the clients. Like it used to happen 20, 30 years ago. It would be nothing if you had a commercial studio type of, you invested in some gear and got you a live room and a control room and you became really popular, your recording studio was really popular, trust me, you would stay booked. Your gear, you would need a maintenance crew because your gear, because it would never turn off. AC bill be off the chart, but you wouldn't worry about that because you got the clients were getting 100, 250, $500,000 budgets. Like Prince was getting $1 million advances because they knew Prince was going to, Prince put out an album, he knew it was going double, triple platinum. When you have artists like that, they'll give an artist $1 million advance when they know that they're going to make double platinum, triple platinum. Warner Brothers knew this, but not every artist can do Prince or Michael Jackson, whatever the case. Not some artists, or just become one-hit wonders. So anyhow, see, Matt, yeah, it's harder to find demos of gear. If I hate to say, it's just, it's just overall, you still have to like the music, but even though, trust me, a really good artist and a really good sound, that's the, that two combination is, it kind of one complements the other. It just makes the artist sound better when you have better gear, but at the same time, it makes, really good artists, good musicians, a good music production, all that, so. Yeah. Oh, technically, yeah. If the customer comes in with not so great music, at least I can sell them. Yeah. Which is true, because it's kind of like, if you got a really good setup, yeah, naturally I'm gonna, you're probably gonna get a better recording. So, that's the idea. Let's see. Say we've been in a studio in Los Angeles for 21 years. We are moving to a spare room at a house due to the building being. Yes, exactly. What is audio saying? It's just the recording studio is, and believe it or not, the music recording studio business is not the only business suffering. It's also the photography business, because most people, when it comes to a person with a camera, when someone has a camera, see, everyone seems to like, I got an Android, I'm doing all my photos and videos with this, right? Or if you have an iPhone, but versus a real camera with a lot of lenses, and it's on top of that, you got the strobes, you got the flashes, you got the backdrops, all these props, you got the fuses and everything. They really make an exciting looking photo, but people aren't interested in that anymore. They like, they'll take a selfie with their phone, click, they're like, click, and they'll share it on Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram and everything else. That's all people are happy with. So it's kind of like trying to sell someone in the photography business to pay this kind of money to get these high-end photos, when actually they're just trying to share a few photos on Facebook. They can do that with their phone. It's hard to sell that. So photographers in the photography business are also suffering. So 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 that's what it is. Okay. Well, oh, welcome, El Summers. Did I not welcome? Herbert said, you're talking, but you're not showing me what I need to get. Well, you have to ask what you want. You have to, because right now you're probably tuning in. I've been on this live stream for about 45 minutes, and you kind of, like if someone asks me some suggestions, or what do you suggest? Is this a suggestion? Then I'll talk about that. But a lot of times I'm just reacting to the comments that are coming in. I don't know if you can see the comments, but I can see all these comments coming in. So I'm just responding to the comments, if you're wondering that. So so I know you saw the title, Choosing Gear for Your Studio, right? But I'm just responding to the comments. So now if you got some questions, I'll throw out my opinion of what I think. This I'll just say, welcome DL. Said, how are you? What I'm actually, you didn't miss much. Right now, I'm just responding to comments, that we're talking about, because I was going to talk about choosing gear for your studio, and then of course, as comments come in, it kind of diverts what the subject is talking about. So, and let's see. Okay, okay. Oh, he's asking someone else. Okay. So, Matthew said, how do you like the warm tube mic? I like it a lot. I like it a lot. And if for ones that know, it's the Warm Audio 47 tube microphone. Yes. To me, it's like buying a Telefunken, or not a Telefunken, a Neumann 47 without spending the Neumann 47 price, which I highly recommend. I'm going to elaborate on what Herbert was saying. This is what I would recommend for microphones. I would recommend a couple of nice solid state microphones, like maybe like me. I have the Rode NT2As. I like those microphones. They have a really low noise floor. They're really versatile, and they're really a really great microphone. And they're affordable. Something like the Warm 47 tube. But I also have, they don't make them anymore. I have some, they're called the T 190s. These are basically C12 clones. They were made by a company called Badax, BADAXX. They don't make those microphones anymore, which is a shame, because I did the Christmas album with the artist that I did with that microphone. That's a really great microphone, and it's super, super affordable. It's a tube microphone, has an output transformer, really great microphone. They don't make it anymore. I would say, I can't tell anyone as far as DAWs, because everyone has a preference. As far as DAWs, I'm familiar with pretty much all the DAWs, not every single one, but most DAWs I'm pretty familiar with. I would say when it comes to DAWs, it's really about how do you like to work. For me, I've been using Cakewalk and Studio One for years. Reason why I use Cakewalk, because I can get up and running fast in Cakewalk. I just know it. Even though there are people that like Logic Pro, I know enough about Logic Pro. I just don't use it enough, but I know enough to be dangerous on it. I definitely know how to use Reason. I definitely know how to use, I'm trying to think what else, Harrison Mix Bus. So I definitely know those DAWs. The reason why I like Cakewalk a lot, because Cakewalk was pretty plug-in friendly. It will pretty much use any plugin, whether it's even 64-bit or 32-bit. You can still use those plugins in Cakewalk. A lot of times you can't use those older plugins in other DAWs. They just won't see it. Now, some people like Luna. I like Luna. And I think Luna, for a free DAW, is catching up to Cakewalk. But Cakewalk still got a lot of functions that Luna doesn't have. Luna is still not as user friendly like Cakewalk. But you just have to know it. For me, a lot of times I spend a lot of time just trying to learn these DAWs before I, start messing with them. I'll just try to find everything about the DAW before, including watching other people's videos on tutorials of those DAWs before so I can say, oh, okay, that's how you use it, or that's how you can get to recognize to see, for example, sometimes you can go on those DAWs and you don't even know how, your MIDI controller, your DAW won't see the MIDI controller, whatever. And it's because there's certain things you got to do. But what, Cakewalk and Studio One is my number one too. I also, some people said, I think someone's asked one of my top three DAWs. I like also Harrison Mix Bus. So those are my top three: Harrison Mix Bus, Cakewalk, and Studio One. But I like them all. I like Reason Studio too. Some people like FL Studio. I'm just not a big fan of FL Studio. So it really depends. Let me see. As far as plugins, when choosing plugins, like me, I like IK Multimedia, but I also like all, any of these plugin companies, Acoustic Audio. I have Slate. I have Waves. I have free ones. It really depends. But IK Multimedia is probably my number one go-to plugins. Let's see, I said microphones. As far as audio interfaces, excuse me, you really have to choose an audio interface that's going to give you enough inputs and outputs. But at this point, I'm like, when it comes to audio interfaces, at this point with audio interfaces, I'm like, just choose one. It doesn't matter if it's a Focusrite, M-Audio, Behringer, Lynx, RME, just pick one. There, a lot of them are really, pretty good today. Now, if you want to go on the higher end, then I definitely would say at least look at Market or Unicorn Motus, Lynx Aurors, Apogee. If you want to spend that kind of money, Antelope, those are definitely. I'm trying to think what else. Studio monitors. I don't have super expensive studio monitors. So I do have the Mackie HRA, and also been using the Behringer Truths for years. I also have the JBL 305s. Those work well for me. I would love to get some Barefoots or ATCs, but I really don't need them. I would love to have them, but I just don't need them because I can hear accurately with those monitors. Other than that, just finding you a nice, comfortable space to work in. So let me see. We got some more comments coming in. Yep, man, you hit it on it. You hit it on. Man Network says, I think people are getting into the studio production game. Should focus on a good, cheap interface with enough channels to stay in the box with plugins and enough quality. Yeah, pretty much you can. The only thing when it comes to gear that I would recommend some outboard gear would be is at least a couple of nice external mic pre's. The one thing that to me that absolutely needs to sound the best in your recording out of anything is vocals. I'm not saying you should diminish the instruments. The instruments, most of the time, the instruments and VST plugins or your instrument sounds that comes in your keyboards, whether you have a Montage or a Roland Phantom, Korg Kronos or whatever, the sound quality of those instruments are already ready to go. They really are. If you're going to use those keyboards, or if you play guitar, most people that play an instrument, bass, guitar, horn, that have been playing for a long time have already upgraded to a higher quality Um, they've already, you know, if you've been playing horn, let's say you play trumpet, and you started off with a Bundy, because I'm a trumpet player, $100 student Bundy, and you've been playing horn for 15 years, you probably most likely by this time have advanced to a Bach Stratosphere horn, trumpet, $2,000 horn. That's just what most musicians that are really good at the instrument does. If you're a guitar player, you probably advance from a $200 guitar to $1,000 Gibson or whatever, Les Paul or whatever. Um, and you probably upgraded the pickups, the bridge, the strings, even the tuners. You probably done that with your guitar. And you probably have some high quality amps by now, some really high quality sounding Fender or Marshall amps. That's just musicians do that. If you're a horn player, sax player, you probably have a really good sounding Yamaha. You don't have a cheap $100 Yamaha sax. You got a really nice sounding $2,500 alto sax with a really $300 mouthpiece using high end reeds and stuff like that. So on that instances, the sound quality for the recording is already there with the instruments. But in your, you still want to try to capture the best quality sound from those instruments, especially acoustic instruments like horn, sax, trumpet, whatever, guitar. I would recommend at least a nice, good sounding preamp. You don't even have to have a $3,000 preamp. I would say something like even you would do exceptionally well with like the Warm Audio Tone Beast as an example. That's an affordable, really, really, really good sounding, pro sounding preamp for $599. That's the Tone Beast. It's one of Warm Audio's best selling preamps. It's the Tone Beast. Something like that, along with your interface, and you can get away with plugins and everything else, but definitely, at least on the preamp. Some people eventually will want to get away from plugins such as EQs and compressors and start using actual external gear, which is perfectly fine. That's the reason why I have more, I have quite a bit of outboard gear because I use plugins occasionally. For the most part, I like when I'm using the actual outboard gear. It's just something about it, especially going through the Allen Heat console back there behind me. So let's see, Zone Recording. Welcome, Zone Recording Studios. Yep. Like for me, you don't have to be like me and have like 15 different DAWs. Like for me, I've just been using Cakewalk forever. So that's why I can get in. It's like my first choice. Then Studio One, I've been using it for, I don't know, 10 years. I'm going to say 15, about 10 years I've been using Studio One. And then Harrison Mix Bus, and then the other DAWs, I dabble with the other DAWs like Reason and Mixcraft 9 and and so forth, the other DAWs, Logic and so forth. But I use Cakewalk because I can get going really, really fast in Cakewalk, faster than any other DAW. It's the fastest because I just know it. So, and I'm sure this is with anyone. Let's say someone that's been using Pro Tools. I'll tell anyone, if you've been in the Pro Tools, I don't use Pro Tools, but people that are Pro Tools, if they know it well, I wouldn't change unless you just don't like their marketing strategy. And I think that's the reason why a lot of people were shying away from Pro Tools, because Pro Tools were making people pay for things they shouldn't have to pay for, like tech support. If I bought the DAW, I should get the tech support. But now you got to pay that, and if not only going to help you, we might even disable your DAW. That's just no. But anyhow, plus Pro Tools is one of the few that you have to use iLok, which I don't like that either. Just like there's some plugins that make you use iLok. I don't like that. Like IK Multimedia, you don't have to have iLok, but Slate you do. They need to get rid of the iLok. I know some people are like, well, it's the purpose of make sure you're not. I know there's reason behind iLok, but anyhow. So let me ask. Let me see. I got some more comments coming in. Where equipment is a major accomplishment. Let's see a minute. What I'm saying. Let me see. Dia's asking Mark, are the plugins from Luna Pro able loaded with into other DAWs, or is it used in Luna only? I think no. You can use like me. I bought the API channel script through Universal Audio. That usually is used within Luna, but I also can use it in the other DAWs. So you're not limited to because a lot of times those plugins when you buy them, so they're used. They're just in your VST folder. So your other DAW should definitely should see it. If it's VST Virtuos AAX, which is a Pro Tools format type of only. So yep. Let me see what else we got. Zone recorder. I use Radar converters. Radar is one of those hard disk recorders that it's probably the best system for getting the sound as if you're recording to a tape machine without actually owning a tape machine out there. I don't know any other system. Now I have the Alesis, but 24, it's a 24 HD, 24 hard disk recorder, but the converters and Radar just, they're renowned for that, having a hard disk recorder, but sounds like tape machine, because tape machines are just like, it's the epitome of recording is the tape machine. That's the reason why they're trying to make so many saturated plugins to sound like a tape machine, because the sound is hard to beat. Well, we've gotten so accustomed to listening to, when you go back to the recording studio that had the large console and all the outboard gear, well, the part of the sound was the tape machine. That is, you listen to some of your number one records, especially for the 70s, 80s, and 90s, was 2-inch tape machines. Studers was like the Rolls Royce of all of them. Studer, like an 800 or 827, and so forth. There was Atari and there was MCI and other 24-track tape machines, but Studer was like the go-to tape machine. But those tape machines were $40, $50 to $100,000 tape machines then. Now you can probably get one used probably $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 now. But it's not the tape machine that's the issues. Just calibrating the tape machine and getting and tape, because tape, $200 or $300 are real. And the problem with tape is you can't edit tape like you can a DAW. And another thing is, most of the time you only got about 3, maybe 4 songs on the tape. And that was it. Because, depends on what the speed that you're running the tape machine at, 15 inches per second versus, or 30 inch, you ran 30 inches per second, you're running out of tape real fast. So people are like, well, I can just record to a hard disk, terabyte hard drive and get 200 songs compared to 3 songs on tape. But I digress. So it's a Bigwig 8-track is free. Wow, Bigwig. I forgot about Bigwig. That's another DAW. So let me see. Yeah, that's the thing. He said once I register with iLok, yeah, I know my password for iLok. It's just that I just don't like it. But I never remember my password. So, and it said, who makes the Radar converters? I believe it was made by actual Radar. I think Radar used to be made by Atari. Atari used to make Radar systems, and then bought Radar around 2000, and they went from there. But if you can get your hands on an Radar, especially I think it's Radar 2, because then they made it DAW compatible. Those will be nice to have if you can find a good deal on them. I just haven't found any Radars cheap. Then let's see, Man Network says all interface preamps kind of suck. no matter how expensive the interface. Having at least one great rep. And said it. I've always said this. I just like for me, my Antelope doesn't have preamps in it. Neither does my Motu. Well, my other Motus, they do have preamps in it, but I use external preamps like my Avalons or my Universal Audio 610 or my 73s or whatever. So they just with those type preamps, they just sound better. They come on the recording, they just sound better. Sometimes you can even do like even my Tone Beast. I prefer the Tone Beast, warm-minded Tone Beast, than audio interfaces preamps. So that's just me. Dio, you got to stop erasing your comments. There's other people on the channel that might be thinking the same thing you're thinking, and you erase it. You know, you're taking your comments out. You know, that's leave your comments, man. So, which means I'm about to, because sometimes when I revert back to, I might miss one of your comments. If you erase it, I might not be, I might, you might, you know, I might revert back to something, you know, I might miss something that you wrote that I can elaborate on. Someone else might be thinking, but if you erase it. So, anyhow, because I'm about to read your next one. It says, I would like to see you like me do a mixing video like Joe C. Do you use control services mix with? Yeah, you have a fader port. Yeah, I have a fader port right here. But believe it or not, I don't use the fader port as much because I can control everything with the MIDI controller. I can fast forward and I can even control the faders in the DAW and everything through my MIDI controller. It's just easier for me when I'm sitting here to turn around and control everything from my control, including arm the track, mute the track, everything from the DAW. So what I like about it, because not only can I control the tracks with the DAW, I can also control the sounds, the plugins, the VST instruments from the MIDI controller. So that's the reason why I prefer using the MIDI controller over just the fader port or DAW controller, because the MIDI controller can do the same thing and more. So let me leave. So yeah, I'm just saying, it's just like, you know, if you take your comments out, because sometimes I go back and reflect on some of these comments so that it might remind me of something else. So man says, I'm a need 73 fanatic. Also, so get used to a 73 for about for like $700. Yeah, like I said, there are so many needs to 73. It's one of the most cloned pieces of gear when it comes to preamps, because everyone wanted that Neve preamp sound, but most people couldn't afford a Neve console like an 8048. You know, those Neve 8048s were still $500,000. You'd be amazed that console costs more than most people's homes. So they're like, well, if I can't afford the console, I can at least get the preamp. So I'm gonna get the at least the preamp out of it, because you're getting the preamp and the EQ, which is the desired thing that people want, is the preamp and the EQ. So it's why they, you know, it's one of the most sought after preamps out there. You can never go wrong with it, you know. Even if you don't get an actual Neve 1073, you might want to look at the clones. Let's see. Let's see. Let me see. I said this. I have a Lisa's VL49 MIDI controller with knobs on it, but I haven't mapped any plugin yet because I'm still not at mix stage. But okay. Yeah, I think, like I said, I'm not familiar with the Lisa's VL49, but I'm sure anything would help some people want to not always just use the keyboard and mouse, so I'm sure that would definitely help. Matt says the Behringer 73 clone reviews have started coming in. I think because everyone knows there are mixed feelings about Behringer gear, and I'm no exception. I like most Behringer gear, but I have there's a few pieces of Behringer gear that is like but what's unique about Behringer with the 73, just like they have the Neve 33609 clone they're making and so forth, is Behringer got smart and actually recruited engineers that used to work with Neve. And they brought them over to Neve and they worked on those clone designs for Behringer. These are guys from Neve. And they improved a lot of things about it. That's the reason why Behringer, for the first time, with them introducing their clones, just like they're coming out with the Universal Audio 6176 clone, they are, I think, they're going to be some serious contenders. Behringer's going to be a serious clone contender with the rest of the clone companies like Warm Audio, Stem Audio, Vintech Audio, BAE, and all these other clone companies. They're going to be a contender because Behringer decided to hire the right engineers. Now, the only thing that I can say about the Behringer is their build quality is still a little, because I'm hearing the bad things about the knobs, which is that was always Behringer's issue, is their knobs, their build quality. So it's kind of like you got to be careful with Behringer because of the build quality. But if you can get around that, they've gotten better with everything because they've adapted some heavy hitters under their company, like Midas, Tannoy, TC Electronics, and all these big heavy hitters in them. Behringer owns them now. So, this is why they decided instead of using, because Behringer wasn't really good for their preamps. That's why they started using Midas preamps and their mixers and their interfaces, because they knew Midas had better preamps. Well, instead of using Behringer preamps, let's just use Midas. And there you have it. This is the reason why the Behringer X32 became such a very, very successful digital console for Behringer, because they decided to use Midas preamps. So let me see. Also, that kind APC 20, the fader controls on it. I wanted to have the ability to practice mixing with plugins when I find. Okay, got you. Let's see, one channel called Mission Control. Do the show between Behringer 676 and a vintage German preamp. Oh, okay, gotcha. So, like a man says, the Behringer 70 is it's too bright to be. I don't know. I don't own one, so I can't comment on it. I would have to hear some stuff recorded with it. But I do know what I do know about it is that they brought in some better engineers to design their stuff over what they were doing 20 years ago. That I do know. So I said I was here. I'll get to on other people's. Yeah. But anyhow, on Warheart Yards. Okay. And I would say this when it comes to watching other channels. I mean, even I do that. I would tell anyone, you would be silly to sit there and say people only watch like my channel. No, people watch, people watch, like, for example, Barry John's channel. There are a lot of people on my channel that watch Barry John's channel. Or there are people like Bolo the producer's channel. There are people that watch other channels. I kind of stopped watching Bolo the producer. And I got my reasons. And every now and then, even when Barry Johns puts out sometimes he's actually correct. For me, I've been even Spectral Sound Studios. until reason why I really stopped watching Spectre Sound Studios is because he's thrash metal bias. He thinks everyone that watches channel is into thrash metal, into heavy metal, like and some people was tuning into his channel for knowledge, and and so it's kind of like my biggest thing was when you start, like the stuff that he was saying, like for example, how he was bashing Clark Technique and saying Clark, if anyone has Clark Technique in their studio run, stuff like that, it's offensive to me because I have absolute zero problems, and I proved it. I have Clark Technique gear, and there's nothing wrong with Clark Technique gear. Now, is Clark Technique gear going to be like, let's say you get their Pultec clones? Is it going to be like a Pultec? Of course not. Pultec is about $8,000, right? The Clark Technique is about $400. I am not expecting the Clark Techniques to compete with a Pultec. What I am expecting the Clark Technique is to give you a flavor of EQ in an outboard piece of gear that you might not have in a plug-in. That's how I look at it. So, anyhow, moving on. So let's see. Someone says, and Behringer brought TC Electronics due to Behringer having sold more. They will. Let me see. Here's the thing with Behringer. The problem with Behringer, and I've proven this even with their composer. The problem with Behringer gear, and Behringer gear is no different than any other cheap piece of gear, right? What made Neve or any high-end piece of gear is naturally the electronic components, right? The type of capacitors, resistors, op amps, and things like that. Behringer would not be able to mass produce as many of their pieces of gear if you use the exact same components like Neve. The idea behind Behringer was to give people gear that they actually could afford. But what they did, what gave Behringer such a bad rep was they had poor quality control. Buttons breaking, things like that, which gave, Behringer's build quality was even more suspect than the actual sound quality. Because Behringer was trying to make everything under the sun to get people to buy them. And I think Eli Behringer, what he did was he made the mistake of he's trying to make everything: synthesizers, headphones, guitar, effect pedals. He's trying to make amps. He's trying to make speakers. He's trying to make a ton of outboard gear. He's trying to make preamps. He's trying to make, it became ridiculous. And then a lot of times, what he would do is, of course, what he was smart about it is the gear would actually look like pro level rack gear. It's just the quality of it. So he sold enough of it to turn into a $1 million company, right? But at the same time, because he sold enough, he realized his name was being trashed throughout the industry for poor quality. So finally, he got smart, and these other companies, and this goes into the, like you have a company like Tannoy, which is a very reputable company. They're really well known for making really nice sounding studio monitors, studio speakers, right? But they're not, these companies, like TC Electronics, Tannoy, and all that, they're not selling mass produced like the companies like Studio One selling more. Company like Studio One was selling more 2-channel interfaces than you have some company, like Antelope, who's not selling millions and millions of Antelope interfaces, as an example. They just, because they're $3,000-$4,000 a shot. So Behringer was able to say, okay, they acquired enough money. Okay, Tannoy is kind of struggling. And this happens with not just music, gear. This happens in the industry with any company. They was able to acquire Tannoy, and Midas was in the same boat, TC Electronics in the same boat, and all these different companies that were almost to the point, Behringer made enough money to buy them, where they could switch up the quality control, the components, which gave Behringer a better reputation. They start coming out with better sounding gear, better gear altogether. So Behringer kind of, that's all I can really say about Behringer. So I would say you're more likely to be able to trust Behringer gear today than you were probably 30 years ago. That's all I can say. Okay. Oh yeah, talking about some of the changes. He said Bolo has a new channel. He seems to be pretty down on the industry. Well, like I said, I used to. I got my reasons why I really kind of, stop watching Bolo. I'm not going to tell anyone, if you watch Bolo's channel, I'm telling you don't stop watching someone because I stopped watching someone. If you like Bolo's channel, I would say continue to watch it. So let me see what else. Warren says all the beat makers are losing ground. Well, I think the music industry is always going to change as far as, genres and music is always going to change. And people are going to, and I think what's happening is people want to start hearing more singing in music. And actually, I'm talking about actual singers. I think that's what come up. Oh, yeah. Plus, someone says AI. Oh, yeah. AI is starting to become a problem. It really is, because AI is really starting to. To me, I don't like the fact, even though people may find it that they may like AI because it's easy to use AI, but I'm not really big on something that if a human was not involved in it. Because it doesn't make it personal. It's kind of like everyone watching this channel. You're doing stuff and making music. I'm more interested because we as humans, we put a lot of thought process and stuff that we do. AI is just a lot. It's just a lot of algorithms that they generate. So that's just me. So let's see. So does it make sense to bypass those machines and focus on outboard gear, since the outputs on gear will need to be processed with effects anyway? Like I said, when it comes to outboard gear, how can I describe? Let me. How can I describe it with the console and outboard gear and things like this? It's almost, there's a depth, a warmth depth, a depth, DEPTH, right? Depth to the sonic that usually isn't there if you don't do the traditional because here's the thing, being hybrid is kind of unavoidable because pretty much 90% of us are recording into an audio interface that goes into a PC or Mac, right? So there's already digital conversion there. It's already there. Unless you just do complete tape machine, because you can't even use ADATs or Tascam D88s anymore, because those are digital conversion machines as well. Unless you are an analog console recording to a 2-inch tape machine and you use outboard gear and there's no computer whatsoever, But there is a sonic depth. You lose a little bit of that. You lose a little bit of that using audio interfaces. Even if you have the most expensive, you can use the Burrow Mothership. That's probably one of the most expensive audio interfaces out there. $20,000, $30,000 interface, right? But you still, there's a depth sonic. Whether someone playing a saxophone or a trumpet or acoustic guitar, a real drum set or whatever. So our ears have already become accustomed. Our ears have already become accustomed to digital conversion in some form there. We're just used to it now because of the interfaces. But when you run that through an analog console and the outboard gear, a lot of that is still preserved in that sonic depth. Now, if you were strictly in the box, would it be you know, is it, you really have to, a trained ear can hear it and say, oh, that's you know, a trained ear, but the average consumer that just listens to music, they're not into recording, they're not into studio, they're not into gear, plugins, outboard gear, anything like that. They just listen to music. What they hear is just songs. They just hear the music. They don't hear the sonic depth difference, especially when people listen to music on their speaker on their phone or earbuds or whatever. They're not listening to an actual serious stereo system, you know, an audio file. I'm talking about a serious, you know, through a set of server in Vegas or whatever. They're just listening to a pair of computer studio monitors or whatever. Or they don't hear it. They're just, they hear, you can hear the music, but you don't hear, but a trained ear can hear. You're like, yeah, it sounds like music. It sounds, you know, whether you're doing everything right. You got bus channels, you know, you did the mixing, you got master bus, you know, you did, everything was master, all this. It's going to sound, it will sound good, but a trained ear will hear, it lacks a little bit of sonic depth when it's done just strictly in the box. And so that's, I know that's a long answer to that, but there are people that it's kind of like you hear, but you don't realize you're missing until you realize, you won't know it's missing until you realize it's missing, if that makes sense. Man says AI still sound like crap. I haven't heard a single good AI song yet. Well, yeah, remember, as far as AI, and that's just where I agree, because AI is trying to generate what it thinks the audience likes. It's not personal. It's kind of like like a robot. It's almost like, the best way I can describe AI would be like, I don't know if everyone saw the movie I, Robot with Will Smith. And it was a robot that was it was the one robot that was actually acting human, but it didn't really understand emotional feeling like a real human. It was trying to, but it really couldn't, you know. And most of those robots, especially they were the outdated robots, and they were there just to serve, you know, would you like some, you know, whatever. They didn't have any human. It's almost like you have to be able to human to read, like, it's almost like a person can make a facial expression. Like, let's say you tell a bad joke and you go, let's say, you know, bad joke, you know, something like, why did the chicken cross the road? Oh, because it had, you know, it had barbecue on the other side. And then all of a sudden someone goes, you know, AI doesn't know, we as humans, we can, the facial expression, like, AI doesn't know how to read that emotional expression. It doesn't, because that's a human thing. It's unexplainable. But I think that's the same thing with music. When a human makes music, you can interact, because we as humans, like anything else, we're social creatures, including we're emotional social creatures. So we sense that even in music. So That's the best way I can describe that. Let's say DLC. Oh, okay. Let's see, I use digital dedicated recorders, but it's computer. It's not tape. So I use the console. I'm slowly getting ragged. I got you. Well, going back to ADATs and digital recorders was the alternative to tape machines before the DAWs really kicked off. So, and someone else see, I looked at the MPC 3000, 4000, ASR X Pro prices 1,000 higher than last year. Um, let's see. Like me, I still have the MPC Renaissance and the MPC Studio. Some people like the different MPCs. I'm very I hadn't a reason to, because I don't use my MPC religiously like that to change MPCs. But someone says, what about MPC One? Plus, like I said, for me, I'm happy with the MPC Renaissance. It does everything I need to do for working in MPC. Samples are good, but hardware can make sound worse. Yeah. Welcome JLBTK, JLTBK. Oh, got it. If you go backwards, you're talking about going with the older MPC 3000. Gotcha. Okay. Our word says, you mean Will Smith IR? I don't know. I'm just saying, I was just talking about the movie he was in with iRobot. If you watch how those robots were in that, there was one robot that was actually, the whole point was that one robot wanted to be human, but it really didn't, because it was a robot. Even though it was doing everything, like, we get mad, angry, and everything else, but it really was trying to emulate. It's almost like a person that is, what's the best way I can describe it when it comes to AI would be, if you talk about a human, what a real human AI would be? Like a psychopath or a sociopath, right? Or even a narcissist. We talk about people that lack empathy, right? The problem is when you're a person that doesn't understand empathy, you lack emotions. You don't, a psychopath or a sociopath can emulate, it's like like sadness. You ever seen kind of like, most people can watch a sad movie that make you cry. Most people, any human with empathy would feel the pain of someone crying in a movie. A person like empathy be like, I don't know why people are crying. They don't understand it. That's like AI. So let me see. Oh yeah, right. Everybody's going back and forth about the MPC stuff. I got you. So let me see. I welcome Seven Sun Music. Let's say, says using a hardware drum machine will make your drums hit harder because you have to run it through preamps to get it in the computer. Yeah, that's the one way you can do it. There's so many ways to really do it. Okay, man. So I got to head out. Have a good. Okay, welcome again, man. Network. Like I said, I'm not gonna be here very much longer myself. Because I hadn't live streamed last week, so I went to live stream. Just here to talk about questions, stuff like that. Going back to, I'm still pondering on what Herbert said earlier about not. He said, "You're just talking, but you're not talking about what we need to get." And I'm like, well, that's just that questions aren't. The comments aren't leading to that. I think most of the people that watch this or get on the channel, they have gear. So a lot of people that get on my channel, they're just they're dedicated followers that already have gear. But that was the premise of the video, was choosing gear, because I was going to really talk about how overpriced the SSL Oracle console is. And I'm like, it's kind of like, it's like SSL. And I'm, like I said, I like SSL stuff, especially when it comes to their consoles from the 80s, right? The problem that I'm seeing with SSL is it's like they're becoming to extortion sort of deal now. I'm going to extort my name to get people to buy my product, even though I'm not going to give them much. It's almost failed with that Neve, was that 8424 or something like that. It was that one Neve that only gave you like 2 preamps, no dynamics, no EQ, nothing like that. But it was like 40 grand or whatever, just because I had Neve. I'm like, no, not for that kind of money. So that was what I was going to talk about. Just like I was talking about, I made a video a few years ago about SSL, another product, an overpriced product that people can't afford, and I got, I don't know, 10,000 views or whatever. But anyhow, so oh yes, it was. I don't see the point of paying premium on the odors. He's talking about like even that ASR. The Sonic ASR was the epitome of the ASR was the epitome of samplers in the 1990s. But if you got a Roland Phantom, even the Core Triton, dang near Yamahas, whatever, almost all these boards can sample, and here's the thing with a DAW. And the way you can splice and cut up even in the DAW, you just don't need to buy a sample anymore. You can time stretch and everything in the DAW. You can take a piece of a snare. Let's say you hear a snare sound. Let's say there's a track and there's a sample, and it's, you can take that snare and splice and cut it in the DAW. You do that in Studio One and use it in the DAW. You don't you just don't really need samplers like that anymore. Some people still use those boards for standalone, but that's just how powerful DAWs are. Everything you can do on a sampler, even in your MPC, you can do in a DAW pretty much. So let me see. Oh, he said the only reason why you bought is to get rid of the digital sound of the VST. Well, the conversion, but we talked about the conversion, but yeah, it's almost like that was one thing about the ASR. A lot of times, even though you had to load up your sounds and do your sequence in the ASR, it was almost like a ready sound mix when you were done. And Sonic was known for that. It's one of those companies that it's too bad they went out of business, because I have Ensoniq boards, and they did have a legendary sound all together, including their effects. They were so legendary with the effects. They came with the Ensoniq DP4. They created a rack module that is still sought after. Let me see. The Truth and the Lie. I'll say, welcome, Truth and the Lies. It said depends on your workflow. Also, so yeah, we use samplers for the same reason you use outboard gear, the feel. I got you. Because some people, their workflow, they can, it's kind of like anything else. When you know something, you can work fast and proficient in it, even if it's working on a sampler on a keyboard, which I am not. I'm just saying, for me, a lot of the times, of a lot of sampler and all that, you can do in the DAW. But if you like that workflow, definitely, if it works, I wouldn't change. You do whatever works. That's just me. So to wrap it up on my topic tonight, I was just talking about choosing gear for your studio. And like I said, I was talking about microphones, audio interfaces, DAWs, studio monitors, things like that within the And I was also leading to the point that do you have to buy super, super expensive gear like an SSL Oracle? And I'm like, I don't see why anyone would spend that kind of money on that console. Like I said, for 150,000, because Sweetwater wants 150. It's like 149. I think it was $149,999 for the SSL Oracle. And I'm like, you would do a lot better, in my opinion, getting the SSL XL desk and 24 channels on that, and putting in your own 500 series modules to build your own sound in that console for about $20K. I would get the SSL XL desk before I bought an SSL Oracle. That makes no sense to me. I agree with, like I said, the video is called Fair Tales of Pro Audio. He did a video on it, and I totally agree. I'm just like, that makes no, I'm not spending, because it's SSL. It can be Neve or API. I'm not spending that kind of money. There's so much more you can do. If you had $150,000, there's so much more you can do, because there are things that are overlooked in the recording studio that is overlooked that can get real pricey when it comes to not thinking about buying stuff for your studio that we never think about, like mic stands, cabling, acoustic treatment, and things like that. There's all this stuff can add up really, really fast, really, really fast. Really, really fast, that you never thought about. Like, man, I didn't really realize how expensive cables can be. Yes, cables, especially high-end cables, can get super expensive. Okay, Deals is asking me. I'll go before I go to that. I'll say, okay, let me go back because I missed some comments. Let me see. But the dolls are much fast. Yeah. Oh, you're talking about when it comes, especially when it comes to audit, when it comes to the editing. I'll say, yeah, oh yeah, it's when it feels pressure to be relevant, but I never had that. Yeah, it's kind of like, it's almost like if you have a studio that you buy, if you have a studio, and you're renting the clients, you definitely want to be as relevant as possible because you're renting your studio out. But if it's your own personal use, yeah, there is absolutely no pressure because it's your own personal use. He says, no system boots. My system boots in 4 seconds, ready to record. Yeah, oh, you're talking about, yeah, as far as your workflow and recording to a hard disk recorder, whatever. I get it. I totally get it. Deal says, he asked me, how do we get rid of that thin digital sound of VSTs? What if you buy native instruments, VSTs, and find out what they don't sound as good as your hardware sound? It's really one thing that a lot of people do is they layer. Whether it's a drum sound, whether it's a drum snare, kick, they layer. Because when you layer, stuff that sound thin will start to sound thick real fast by layering. You layer 2 or 3 snares together to get one fat snare sound. You can do that. You'll be amazed. Just do that. Same thing with your keyboard sounds and everything else. A lot of times, even in the studio back in the day, they would layer a synth bass with an actual real bass. They've been doing that for years. So that's one way you can make it sound thicker and warmer, is by layering. And someone says, yeah, the price is off the hook for that. Yeah, it's just, to me, that you can't justify at least the SSL Origin. It's still a pricey, but at least that was more affordable. I mean, that made more sense. If I'm going to get a console, I would get an Origin before I get an Oracle. The Oracle, it just, some people, they'll justify owning, but I can't. Just like with that Neve, I think it was the 80, was it 4884 or something like that. It was a Neve only. They try to say it was 30, 40 grand, but you only got 2 preamps. No dynamics, no EQ, nothing, just 2 preamps. No, no. Um, so again, it says it doesn't have dynamic. Yeah, exactly. Um, see, oh, you said worse. I never bought a Megami yet either. You know, I find I need to not filter samples. Oh, you talking about, yeah, for certain frequencies? Yeah, gotcha. Um, it's all about, when it comes to samples, it's also the source that you're sampling can make a difference. Um, so, oh, your worse. There's no way I can justify a new Monica. Like I said, for me, because I know how great these older consoles. Some people just don't want to deal with older consoles because it wasn't necessarily even know so much the console as it is the preamp or the amp, that powers the console. You would need to, your HVAC, because those amps can get really, really hot. Um, and you want to run a nice cooling system to keep those cool. But it's also a lot of those in the back, they were 220, they weren't 110. So, and you weren't, it was not very good to keep powering them up and powering them down. That's why they stayed on, which reason what drove the electricity bill. Um, but um, in the end, a big console, unless you are, bands, and you're going to make your money back anyway, recording. If I was going to have a big studio, a large console, and I know I'm going to keep making money, recording bands that have the budgets, I think I would go with a Neve VR, a used one, or an SSL 6000 or 4000 or whatever, or an older MCI console or something like that, and find one used for between 10 and 20, $30,000, and then spend another 10, 15 or whatever, what it costs the maintenance and recap and everything else, and get it sounding like a beautiful console. I would go that route before I spend that kind of money because it's an SSL. I just wouldn't. If I'm gonna get an SSL, I'm gonna get an older one, get it fixed up, because then I know it'll go for another 10, 15, 20 years. So um oh, someone saying Maddie, oh, big boy prices is no different than, well, like I said, actually the big studios aren't charging that kind of money anymore. They're a big studio to charge $5,000 a day. They're not going to get clients, not today. um Even the big studios have dropped down, like, they dropped down to $75 an hour, and we're talking studios that still have like large consoles with outboard, the traditional commercial studio. Their even their prices are, more affordable for the independent now, because they're just not getting, prints with $1 million budgets coming in those kind of studios anymore. Those days are gone. um so let me see, what's in phone, where's one? Okay, got you. Okay, everybody just, they're feeding off each other's comments. Got you. He said SSL out of my league and I'm okay. Actually, no, an SSL was actually not out of your league, not for a used one, unless you just, Now, the only downside to an older SSL board today, and it don't have to be an SSL, it could be a Neve or whatever, is they are big and they are heavy, and they can be challenging to move. That's the only drawback to an SSL or big console like that. The size. Most people don't want to deal with a board that big, and those boards are big. They're big and they're heavy. They're real heavy. But now you can find used boards like that super affordable now. It blows my mind. And an SSL 4000E for $15,000. I think I saw one that was an SSL 4000. Yeah, it was 15, or or it might have been 18,000 in Nashville. $18,000 for an SSL 4000E. I'm like, I just don't have the room because that board, you know, I don't have a room in this room for that board that big and that heavy. My Allen Heath only weighs 140. It's a 48 channel. It only weighs 140 pounds. An SSL with the same amount of channels, it would touch the wall over there, and it's way deeper, and it weighs about 1,200 pounds. It would take 6 people to get it in this room. I just, now if I had a commercial studio, with, you know, if I had, not in my house, but if I had a building, then that's different. So, somebody's talking about, I don't know if I've seen that video. So let me see. Other than that, I'm reading a couple more comments, and other than that, this is pretty much it for the night. Let's see. What do we need to do before we collaborate with an artist business-wise? And if you put out a solo project, how do you monetize it? Okay. Like I said, with artists, it, you know, really, it's a catch-22 with artists, especially high-end artists. Most high-end, because they're still on the old system for the most part, and not just the artist, but the producer, right? For the most part, they still they're still looking to see, do you have an SSL or a Neve or an API or an Audient or something like that? Do you have all the ubiquitous outboard gear, LA2As, 1176s, Telefunken microphones? Do you have a control room? Is there a live room? Are there vocal booths, a drum booth? And on top of that, even if you have all that, they still want to look at your client list. Who's recorded at your studio? Because you can have all that, and if you don't have any artists that had any success and they came out of the studio, they still might not book your studio because you don't have any reputation. So it really depends. So a lot of times, sometimes you have to get in, you know, depends on what artists you might have to do with more independent artists, and hopefully they do well in the industry to gain your studio some reputation. So that way people are like, okay, yeah, let's say I'll make up a name. Let's say it's a female named Lover T. And all of a sudden Lover T start blowing up on the charts. And let's say your studio is called Fanatic Studio, Recording Studios. They see Lover T came out of Fanatic Studios and she's got some #1 hits. Then you're gonna, your phone will start. You know, you're gonna need a hot studio manager, and then you're gonna start bringing out an engineer, and then you're gonna need to start getting assistants, and then now you start hiring a maintenance crew. You know, your studio's gonna start growing, because that's the things that people don't recognize either on the studio is the run cost can be high, because if you're not getting clients and you got all that, you still got to pay your staff. So it's one of those, and that's paying the staff. That's still not including paying for the building, the maintenance, the lights, the water, the gas, utilities, the insurance. All that still has to be paid. So, and that's what can also drive a studio out of business. Having all that and not being able to, they ran out of money down. They got to shut the studio down, let everyone go, and start selling gear. So, or you can do like me and buy stuff in pieces over the years. That way, I don't have no staff, so I don't have to worry about. I don't have to worry about firing anyone because I own everything. Plus, it's in my house. But the thing is, as long as it's in my house, the chance of you getting some like a Mariah Carey to come to my house is slim to none. Not saying it can't happen, but it's slim to none unless I happen to. And if I ever got to the point where I can even get a Mariah Carey to look at my studio, I probably won't be in this house, if that makes sense. But anyhow, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I'm going to shut it down. Just wanted to live stream because I didn't get a chance to live stream last week. And if I got any new subscribers, thanks for tuning in. I want to thank everyone for tuning in for the night. And, you guys are great, as always. And we're going to, as I think of topics to talk about. So, but as always, now, like I said, I'll say this one last time. Sometimes I'll title something, but me going through the comments, we'll divert the chat. That's just, but anyhow, I thank everyone, and we'll see y'all next time when the next time I live stream. And I hope everyone enjoy their Sunday evening. And that's going to do it. Yeah, have a great one.